Hey, everybody. Welcome to Away Games, a Chicago Cubs podcast. My name's Kevin McCaffrey, and over there is Adam Amawala. Hello, Adam.
Hello, we're in Astoria. We're both in New York. I feel like that's rare for us at this point.
It has been rare. Yeah, I think there has been a lot of crisscrossing. You were just in Colorado for a bit, is that right? And Tennessee, maybe?
Mm-hmm. Didn't get to see the Smokies, but I was in Tennessee.
I am going to see the Smokies, actually,
Cool.
because I'm performing in their hometown on Sunday, June 5th. I'm doing a show in Knoxville. June 3rd, 4th, 5th, I think I'm Asheville, North Carolina, Greensboro, North Carolina, and then Knoxville, Tennessee. So stand-up wise, it is like a little double-A run of towns, kind of, you know.
Will you be taking the bus in between these shows?
No, I'll be taking the 2014 Chevy Cruise bus that I take to my tour bus for one to all these places. But the Smokies are in town; they're home that Sunday, so I'm going to go see them, and that'll be a nice one to cross off.
It's a fitting car to drive, given that the Cubs are kind of in 2014 mode right now.
Just 20 and cruise mode, yeah, 2014 mode, and just really Chevy cruising with a total lack of ambition. But there, since our last episode, there are a couple of there are people on this team that have ambition, at least maybe not higher up in the offices as much, but on the field there are. Also follow us at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram for all the things. And I think, like, first of all, this week the Cubs are riding a 3-game winning streak as we're talking right now, as we're recording this on Tuesday. But how about our good friend, shocking to see this guy doing well, the best player on the team, Willson Contreras. How are you enjoying that?
You know, I feel like a proud parent. I distinctly remember watching his first major league home run. We've gotten to see his development over all these years.
Yeah.
And I tell you something, as bad as last year was, and I think you probably agree with me even more than I agree with myself. If the Cubs trade Willson Contreras, I'm really going to lose my mind.
I mean, I've said this before about other moves this front office and ownership group has made, but I think it's disqualifying. I think you have a ultra athletic, ultra talented catcher who just turned 30. Happy birthday last week, Willson. And yeah, catchers don't typically age the best, but also I feel like you see a lot of catchers hanging around pretty long as at least like part-time catchers. And now that the DH is in the National League, and we saw Willson Contreras have a hell of a DH day yesterday where he had a double and a grand slam in the first inning. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, I think like he's I think inarguably a top 3 catcher in baseball. If you want to be harsh on him, you could maybe say top 5. But if you're not going to lock that up when he's here, he's the longest tenured Cub in the organization. I mean, he was signed as kind of a non-prospect. He was a third base guy and really just exploded onto the scene. And I think 2015 was the year he won the AA batting title. But he exploded up. He changed positions. He's done everything right this whole time. He is a 2-time starting all-star catcher. If he continues hitting like he is so far, he's going to be a 3-time all-star catcher. And he wants to stay here. He's done everything right. And if you don't sign him from a team and from a front office that says this isn't a years-long rebuild, well, if it's not, then you lock up your fucking all-star catcher who just turned 30 right now. Because if you trade him, it is a years-long rebuild. And that is inexcusable for a team of this financial might and supposed to be baseball ambition.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was fortunate enough to see Willson Contreras homer on the first ever pitch he saw in an All-Star game, which was pretty cool back in D.C.
Loves a first pitch, this guy.
He does. He absolutely does. Did the same thing with his first home run in the big leagues against the Pirates all those many years ago in 2016. Feels like 100 years ago for a lot of reasons. Some baseball, some not baseball. But in any case, yeah, when you look back at last year, we've talked about this ad nauseum. We don't need to go back into it. It was a natural progression of doing the wrong thing for a long time that came to a head. And you could make the case that locking up Javi long-term, locking up KB long-term, all would have made sense as you're transitioning into whatever the next era is. They're fairly young guys. The only person I could even understand not making that case for is Rizzo, just because of, I guess, his age and perhaps a perception that his back is an issue, whatever.
Always the perception, no matter how many games he plays.
Even if he starts 150 games a year. But
yeah, still talking about the back. The guy just hit his 10th homer, by the way, but yeah.
What I'm getting at is if we are really retooling and not rebuilding, I cannot think of any way to justify not having Contreras be a part of that.
No, and from a personal standpoint, from a guy who is still in his prime, it's early, it's very early, but
Mm-hmm.
is playing as well as he's ever played offensively. We're seeing all the tools he has, and he has more tools than any other catcher in the game in terms of athleticism, arm, all that. His improved framing, which weirdly has taken a big slide back this year by the metrics, but those things take a while to even out. But there's just after the game yesterday, in the interview after he had the big game with the grand slam, also on a first pitch, the grand slam and the double in the first inning. Talking on the field after the game, he mentioned how much it meant to him to hit his 100th home run, because it was 100, and how he never thought he'd hit 100 homers in the major leagues, and how much it meant to him to hit them all with one team, and that those teams were the Cubs, and that he wanted to do it, and that he was happy to do it at home and for these fans. It's just a guy you can't you just couldn't create a player in a video game that you would want to keep around more than this. And it makes me think of the book The Cubs Way. Remember the book that came out?
Yep.
Verducci book. And The Cubs Way, it's so funny and infuriating now to look at, but so much of that talked about how Theo and the front office at the time zeroed in on character guys too,
Mm-hmm.
and treated that as the sixth tool, talking to guys like Rizzo and Almora, who was getting emotional about just wanting to do anything to help this team, right, and all that. And then now we have, if you're getting rid of Contreras at the deadline, you have gone full hedge fund mode, as far away from a character based organization as you possibly can. And it sucks that that's what so many Cubs people are feeling, like we're just bracing ourselves for that to happen.
Well, I think it makes sense that we are, because
absolutely
we all experienced last year, and we've all experienced really everything since 2018 that has happened, or more specifically, that has not happened. I mean, look, even reading the Cubs Way in late 2016, early 2017 when it came out, and feeling romantic about it, even at that time, there were parts of it where I'm like, well, you still did trade for Aroldis Chapman, so let's not completely act like we're only going for the best possible
for sure,
characters. But even in the parts of this year a couple weeks ago where the Cubs have looked completely listless, there is never a moment where Contreras seems like he doesn't care more than everyone.
Holy shit.
And isn't that what you want as a fan?
It's what you want as a fan. It's what you should want as an organization if you're not a bunch of fucking robots. And watching him scream his way around the bases and pump his fist and wave at the bleachers and then pointing and yelling into the dugout coming around third. When this is a team, and I know I see people on Twitter well, what if they get hot now? The Cubs are still a half game behind the Pirates, still currently. So let's chill on that. But this guy does not quit. He does not quit. And we've talked about it before, but it's a thing that Kyle Schwarber said to the reporters after that game where, one of the couple of turning points in the golden era of the Cubs, when they lost to the Rockies and Contreras was basically inconsolable in the dugout, and Schwarber was comforting him, and then came out to talk to the reporters and said, everyone cares, but that guy really cares, pointing at Willson Contreras. And I mean, it's just, and even his position, it's just, there's so many words to say, but they all point to the same thing. And it's that you keep this guy 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, you bridge it to, because if the next great Cubs team isn't happening in that era, everyone should be fired, the team should be sold, etc. And when we talk about people on Twitter being already sort of bracing for the Contreras leaving in the spring, it's not pessimism. Like you said, there's no reason to believe anything different, because when someone repeatedly shows you who they are, you have to believe them. This front office has had a unique inability to negotiate and extend contracts with the people that are already in their organization. So there's no reason to believe it until we see it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And to the point about the interview that he did post game, and if you go to, if you follow the Cubs Twitter account, which you almost surely do if you're listening to this, they retweeted it from Marquee. It's less than a minute long. It's like a 43-second clip. And in those 43 seconds, Willson specifically mentions the Cubs and the organization 4 times. And that's, to me, that's intentional. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of people who would be all about themselves in that moment, and that's not who Contreras is. And I saw some knuckleheads, to use a Barkley phrase, on Twitter being 100 home runs, what's the big deal? I, that's so silly to me because I'm not the Elias Sports Bureau, but I would love to know the percentage of position players who have
Mm.
played in a major league game who get to 100 home runs.
Oh, it's very low. And I was at,
1%?
yeah, I mean, yeah, not even. So it's, I mean, David Ross, I was at the game when David Ross hit his 100th. It was against the Phillies in I believe May of 2016. And he got a curtain call for it, which Willson should have gotten the curtain call too. I understand the inning was still going on, but come on guys, let's pop for this. David Ross had a very good career. He was 38, 39 years old at this point. Wilson's there at 30, and Willson didn't get called up super young. Remember, he
Right.
was up, I think 24, I think deep into his 24-year-old year, and a catcher getting to 100 in that many years is very rare. It's a rare thing, and he's still with the arrow pointing up right now. So, 100 is a big deal. 100 with a single team is a big deal,
Right.
and especially as a catcher. So that's very cool.
Right. And I hate that we have to prepare ourselves for the worst, but there's this dark part of me that's like, do they just hate us as fans? Are they gonna package Hendricks and Contreras together and flip them for
to Toronto for
14-year-old prospects?
Yeah, I mean, I will believe it. I will believe it doesn't happen the moment they announce the extension, and until then there's no reason to believe any of that. But it is weird to just decide you hate everyone already in your organization who's ever actually done anything good. So let's hope that changes right now, but we'll have to actually see it change before any of us feels comfortable there. But
agreed. Now I was going to say, before we even talk about the couple of prospects that the Cubs called up today, you were talking about how Cubs Twitter and baseball Twitter and Twitter in general is very reactionary, right? It's whatever's going on in the moment. That's how everyone feels, and nothing will ever change that. And I am of the opinion that a team never is as bad as they look on their worst day and is rarely as good as they look on their best day. Having said that, after a very rough stretch, the Cubs have won 5 of their last 7 games. Now, the Diamondbacks, not a great team, but also the Cubs haven't played particularly well in Arizona for many years. I feel like I have triggering memories of the Cubs just blowing games in Arizona, much like
that playoff series.
Yeah, for sure that. And winning 2 out of 3 at San Diego, also impressive.
Absolutely.
Now playing the Pirates and doing what you should do against the Pirates. And if you look ahead at what the Cubs have coming up, this is a stretch where you can make up for how bad that stretch was against really good teams. It makes sense that the Cubs lost most of those games, or all of them in that case, against teams like the Dodgers and even I would say the White Sox to an extent, the Brewers. But coming up right now, we're recording this on Tuesday. There are 2 more games against Pittsburgh at home, a 4-game set against Arizona at home, and then 4 on the road at Cincinnati. And look, I am not deluding myself into thinking this team can compete, but if they want to attempt to prove they can compete, this is the stretch to do it, right? The Cubs are 6 games under 500 right now. They have whatever that is, 8, 9, 10 games coming up against objectively really bad teams.
Yes.
So if you are trying to somehow get back to 500, this is the stretch where you can make some of that up. So my question for you is, it was kind of a running joke the first few weeks of this season, how long will this team be above 500?
Yeah.
What is the percentage chance that you think the Cubs get back to 500 or above it at any point this season?
That is a good question, and I think if it ever is going to happen, this is the 2 weeks, right? Like you said, I if I was putting money on it, I'd say it does not quite get there, but I don't know, 20%, because they would need. There's 6 games under currently, correct? We're sitting there at 14 and 20,
right? If they won 7 of the next 9 games against these bad teams, they would get back to 500 basically.
Exactly. But it's and these are bad teams, but Cincinnati was so crazy bad that it couldn't hold up like that forever, even though they did just throw a no-hitter and lose, which is hard to do, which was amazing, and I do respect it. Hunter Green went into the 8th with a no-hitter, walked a couple guys, and then they brought in a reliever. He walked someone, grounder, scored a run, and the Pirates won without a hit.
Unbelievable.
It's a rare case where it's like embarrassing for both teams. The team that like won without a hit and the team that lost throwing a no-hitter. It's like it's kind of a bummer for everybody. But Cincinnati has also won 6 of their last 10 after being as bad as they just couldn't be that bad, you know? Yeah. So I don't know, maybe if they got crazy hot, a 20% back to 500, I would say. What do you feel?
I think that sounds about right.
And I guess for ending 500, I'm putting way lower than that, obviously. But
sure. I mean, basically, what I want out of this season, now that we're in the position we're in, is for number one, the Cubs to at least be watchable, which in this moment they are, and they weren't a couple weeks ago. I mean, that was painful to sit through some of that, especially when they just couldn't seem to score whatsoever. I want them to be watchable, and I want to see some signs of them actually trying to work towards being a winner again. And so for me, that means I'm not saying it. First of all, if the Cubs are even borderline 500, I'm not saying they should go try to get a bunch of help and trade away prospects. I don't think that that's the move anymore. Unless this
I don't either.
Somehow surprises everyone in the world and they become last year's Braves and they go on a crazy run, then sure, you add to the team. I don't think that's going to happen. All I want, don't trade Hendricks, extend Contreras, and just prove to me as an organization that you are moving towards being good again, because there is no reason that a team the size of the Cubs should not be competing every year.
I think that's exactly how I feel too. And it feels like it shouldn't be controversial. And we don't agree with how last year was handled, sort of not only at the deadline. And again, like if you want to sell off everyone at the deadline, they weren't going to win anyway. I think you should have worked out an extension with someone there, but you could have signed any of those guys back or more people than we did in the offseason.
Right.
So that's the disagreement there. Because going into last year, too, we have to the offseason going into last year, they were only halfway trying. And then the offseason coming into this year was less than halfway trying, you know? But now we are where we are. And I think, as I've said before, like we don't give them credit for making the front office and ownership credit for making decisions based on where they are now, because they got us here. Like you don't give a drunk driver credit for steering into a tree instead of a school bus because, well, now that I'm in this position, I'll make the less bad choice. No, don't fucking drink and get in the car, you dummy. Like that's so we can't give Jed
Shots
Hoyer
fired, Tony La Russa.
Yes, exactly. The true manager for this team. But yeah, like so I'm not going to be like, oh, good job, Jed. Now that you biffed it for several years straight, you know, you made a good choice after you're sitting in the bottom of the hole you dug yourself into unnecessarily. But neither of us says sell everything for major leaguers now this year. This team isn't in that position. What we do say is pick a couple of building blocks here, lock them up, and then you can do some of the sell-off of other pieces at the deadline, and then and sort of, you know, retool a little bit one more time going into, and then go hard this off season. I think that's the play.
Right. Yeah, and we've started to see people who could become flippable. I mean, last night saw Wade Miley pitch an absolute gem. It's also incredibly fun to watch someone work that fast.
It's great.
It's really, really nice. And not that I think the Cubs are going to flip Justin Steele, but we also saw Steele have, other than maybe his last start last year, probably his best start in the bigs, right?
Absolutely loved it. And the fact that he was carrying his stuff deeper into the game, he got so many swings and misses on that slider. It hasn't looked, I mean, that's the best that slider's looked this year. I think that's the first pitcher this year for the Cubs to have double-digit strikeouts in the start. And just seeing, after we were worried about his endurance earlier in the year, he's building up. And that's exactly what you want to see from Justin Steele, because we need starting pitching at these guys. Someone has to develop into a starter. We need to stop being like, oh, well, you know, if starting doesn't work out, he can be a multi-inning reliever. That can't be everybody. We need to get a couple starters out of this bunch. And Justin Steele looked so good. And I think that was as encouraging a thing as we saw all week.
Yeah. Now, let's say the Cubs are more or less where they are now. Like, you know, they're not the worst team in baseball, but they're not doing anything this year.
Yeah.
When it comes up to the deadline, who would you actually be a proponent of flipping? Because I think in my mind, I think of like the David Robertsons,
Absolutely.
Michael Givenses of the world, possibly Wade Miley. Like who would you be either okay with or a proponent of the Cubs dealing?
I mean, I think everyone you just said there are the main. Those are the main pieces I think of
Yeah.
as far as things that might actually get you something notable of a prospect return. I think like something of a major league, like I think also you have to think about at some point trading a young major leaguer from this group too, because the Cubs have taken this approach where it's like, what if we just have 50 guys who might be rosterable but aren't breakouts, and just like
Right.
going quantity over quality. But like there's no purpose in trading him now because his stock has never been lower. But like a guy like Nick Madrigal or something who, if you at some point you might find a team that maybe believes in that more or that has a better fit for that type of a bat. Clint Frazier is getting healthy again. I believe in the upside of Clint Frazier's bat, but that could be a guy if he comes up, gets some at bats and is hot, maybe later this year turns flippable. And then I guess besides the guys you said, and I think really the most return you're going to get is from like a Miley or a Robertson on rental guys, but who could be like starting a playoff game or a high leverage reliever. Yan Gomes is another guy because I really like the fact that we have a real catcher in there who's good
Hmm.
besides Willson Contreras, but you can buy one of those every offseason if you
Right.
need. So and
Which
teams,
begs the question: why the fuck did the Cubs not buy one of them going into last year?
hey,
That would have helped early on.
it's a really great question. It's a really great, really great question. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't they develop a pitcher ever in the in 10 years? Why isn't Bryce Harper here? Lots of questions. But yeah, I think Miley, Robertson, and then maybe Givens and Yan Gomes are the guys who you look at and are like, you could flip those. And like Jonathan VR has not looked good lately, but that's the kind of guy who just
Hmm.
is traded for like a, a way more flyer prospect kind of a thing.
Right.
Um, but yeah.
So, shall we talk about the two Cubs that got called up today?
Yeah, let's. Two Cubs were just announced to make the jump all the way up to the majors. Christopher Morel and Brandon Hughes. You want to tell us a little bit about Morel?
Sure. So, as we've talked about before, you are much more of the prospect person than I am. But I will say that Christopher Morel is a name that I have heard a lot on
Mm-hmm.
Cubs Twitter in the past few years. Like Brandon Hughes, I had no idea who that was. I had to like
Mm-hmm.
look up who that even was. But so let's start with the scouting report of Christopher Morel. Christopher is 22 years old. Scouting grades: hit 40, power 50, run 60, arm 65, field 55, overall 40. So basically, Cubs signed Morel out of the DR in 2015. Also signed his brother, Rafael, a couple years later. Let's see here.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, the info on Morel: impressive bat speed and exit velos. He's a righty. Um, let's see, walk rate's been going up. Pretty good speed. Sounds like honest. I mean, so we've got an infielder basically. I don't know where exactly he fits in with the Cubs, infielder,
Yeah.
outfielder. So it's
He's
like
played some
yeah.
he's played some center field too, and he runs well. He has a ridiculous throwing arm. The
Hmm.
65, the scouting grades Adam was reading off there, 20 is the lowest. 20 is the lowest scouting grade possible. Think Albert Pujols speed, 20, and then in terms of 80 is the highest. That's Giancarlo Stanton power, basically.
Right.
So 65 on the arm is very good, very above average, and might even be light on his arm. He's extremely athletic. He can play short. He can play third. He's a plus defender at third, and he can do well at short. He does well at center field. So I think
Yeah,
this is a guy.
and in 22 game or 28 games, excuse me, in Tennessee this year. So sadly, you will not see him. Well, maybe you will. Who knows? But OPSing almost 1,000. So obviously, that's a very very good sign.
Yes, and which is far above what he's done before. This is a guy who struggles to make contact, but he has raw power when he gets to the ball. And it's interesting because he's wiry. Like he's not like a big beefy guy. This is a lean, athletic, quick twitch guy, but he's got raw power in there, and he's exciting. He makes weird defensive plays that you don't see all the time. And I think what you can dream on about this guy is a guy who starts maybe once or twice a week for a very good team. Think in terms of positional versatility, it's your classic, oh, it's Ben Zobrist like, except his bat is nothing like Zobrist. He doesn't get on base. He's getting on base at a 380 clip this year, but that's not, you look at any previous year in the minors, his OPS ended up under 800, I think, every other year. So, you're not, it would take a big spike for him to be a truly productive offensive player, but the defense is plus, and sort of a perfect guy to have on the bench of a good team.
I didn't realize how tiny he was. He's listed at 5'11", 145.
Yeah, I think that weight needs to be updated. I don't think he's 145. I think he's cracking 165, maybe 170.
Some Zach Short numbers there.
Yes, exactly. So he's a little thicker than that, but still very wiry and lean. And his brother Rafael Morel is also in the Cup system, as a little fun fact.
Yeah.
So
he's fun. We'll see how he fits in, and as always, it could be the sort of thing where he's called up for a little bit and then goes back down. But Brandon Hughes, possibly even more compelling than Morel, just because of his story as a position player that has now turned into a pitcher. So tell us about him.
Yeah, Brandon Hughes there's a lot of fun to Brandon Hughes. So he was an outfielder drafted out of Michigan State, and he's 6'2", was a speedy, athletic outfielder, played a lot of center field, I think, at Michigan State. His junior year, stole 30 bases, and then came up and had a decent early run as an outfielder in the Cubs system. He stole 22.
Did he play with Dakota Mekas in college?
He might have. I don't know for 100% sure, but I think they must have crossed over for at least a year there. Because Hughes is 26 years old, and at the end of this year he'd be Rule 5 eligible, and the Rule 5 draft means that after a certain amount in the minor leagues, any major league team can pluck you as long as they keep you up on the major league roster all year. So Hughes he stole 22 bases in a year at South Bend, which is not nothing. This is a legit athlete, and he was converted to a pitcher. He's left-handed. And I think this is a guy who, the 3-batter rule probably works against, because he looks to me, just watching his delivery, like a classic loogie kind of guy. A left-handed specialist. He throws in the low 90s fastball wise, but his slider is very good. His slider has been extremely plus, and this and since, as our friend Brian Smith over at Cub Prospects wrote, since June of last year, Brandon Hughes has thrown 38 innings. He's given up 16 hits, 1 earned run, and has walked 13 and struck out 53. So that's striking out 50. Wow. So striking out 53 in 31 innings is pretty nasty. And as Brian said, he's a live arm, throws 90 to 93, touches 95 if he's really amped up. But really the slider is his plus pitch, and if you watch video of him, it looks like a guy who's just going to be really hard on lefties. And this is a guy who's just obviously been so dominant results wise that I think you have to sort of treat that as possibly real at this point. It's been long enough. And he's bullpen only. This is not a guy who might start, but possibly a really strong left-handed arm in there who looks just really nasty on lefties, and the stats back it up.
So what you're saying is the pitch lab works.
The pitch lab, where yes, as we sit here rooting for a team who, how many years into the pitch lab, has a team ERA that's like 25th in the majors right now. Yes, our pitch lab is amazing, and I'll say Brandon did an amazing job, and whoever's been working with him has done an amazing job, because the results have been crazy, and he's coming up to the bigs. So, and
I give so much credit to anyone who does that kind of transformation. I mean, that has to be incredibly hard when you're seemingly on the cusp as an offensive player, and they're like, hey, you're not quite cutting it, this might be a better route for you. I was even Scott Efros was on the most recent episode of The Compound last week, and he was talking about when the Cubs essentially came to him and they were like, "We're not going to make you do anything, but we would highly suggest that you change your arm angle if you want to stay here." Not in those directive terms, but like that's how he took it, and he took the challenge, and now, I mean, I think he certainly has what it takes to be a permanent big leaguer.
Oh, I mean, like Scott Efros has probably been a guy who has for a long time has been a guy who just keeps doing well and people don't talk about that much. But I mean, is there anyone in that bullpen you feel more comfortable with coming into a game at this point? Like the control's good. He's just that sidearm angle is really weird to look at. Guys don't seem to pick up the ball well. He seems like a straight up win. And for the shit I give, not even like the idea of pitch lab, like there should be pitching coaches and people should be working on this shit. I'm more giving it shit about the branding that we keep hearing about, the magical pitch lab when the results aren't there. But whoever made that decision with Scott Efros to be like, let's try this arm angle. Who did that? That's I mean, what a like coaching victory that is, you know?
I think it was actually Chili Davis who recommended
it. Chili Davis, he's hitting coach isn't working out. He's a master of ground balls. We know that much. So it only makes sense for him to go over to the pitching side and teach you how to do it. So
well, I'm always so impressed by a young guy, or when I say young, I mean rookie, who's unflappable. And I mean, there was in the getaway day game against the Padres that the Cubs almost blew and then ended up winning. There was an inning where they just completely self-imploded defensively behind Scott Efros. I think Efros pitched, 30 pitches and probably recorded what should have been 6 outs in one inning. And the fact that he hung in there and didn't get thrown by that, I think speaks to his maturity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Scott Efros is a keeper. And the fact that we're seeing a couple of, younger bullpen pieces come up that might be keepers, is, and like Brandon Hughes, obviously it's very early for him. I hope to see him get in the game soon, but it seems like that's a legit reliever prospect. Scott Efros seems like a part of this bullpen going forward. And then Ethan Roberts is one of the many Cubs who's been injured and out. But I think I'm a big believer in Ethan Roberts being a keeper here too in that bullpen. So that's all cool to see. And man, the Cubs have had a couple of specific innings this year where they just absolutely exploded defensively. But like Justin Steele's first inning, I want to say against the Brewers, maybe was another absolute goof parade on the field. And it's just like, enough of that. Let's not make pitchers get 6 outs per inning.
Meanwhile, our old buddy Robel Garcia just hit 6 home runs in 6 games, and he's probably sitting there like, what am I supposed to do to get called up here? I mean, what do you want from me?
Absolutely. Robel's, I mean, that's another guy who just like, should probably go to he's weirdly having trouble getting called up to the Cubs, but could probably go to a better team and be a solid bench bat, But
he's the old Robel without a cause.
He is a Robel with no, I mean, then he is a good fit here on this team. But yeah, he's hammering the ball. That's fun to see too. So yeah, I mean, I think those are the main bullet points we're seeing. We mentioned all the injuries the Cubs have, and a lot of them are on their way back. Supposedly Clint Frazier is taking real at bats now.
What was his injury? Because I feel like he all of a sudden just disappeared at a time where I might not have been like watching the Cubs as much as usual, and then I was like, oh, he's not on the team anymore.
Appendicitis. It was so he lost that useless piece of shit organ inside of us. So he was out for a while. Good to see him coming back a little bit. That's cool.
You know what's funny is I was talking to a Yankees fan about Clint Frazier recently, and they were asking how he was doing on the Cubs, and I was like, he's injured right now, and they were like, classic Clint Frazier. It's like, classic appendix.
Yeah. Yeah, his
just appendix, like Clint always has every year.
Yes, his appendix is he's appendix injury prone specific. It keeps growing back. It's just terrible luck, but at some point, it's you got to count it as a skill. And then speaking of injury prone, our boy Nico Horner had some dumbass fucking umpire run into him and sprain his ankle. So that sucks. After he was one of the bright spots here, leaving way for Andrelton Simmons to come up. But David Bodie's making his way back. Alec Mills supposedly on his way back. And the Mills injury has been something that I don't quite exactly know why what's been going on, why that's been so long. And then Stroman and Robertson are going to be back from their COVID IL relatively soon. So it's going to be a
Don't you mean they're the undisclosed IL?
The undisclosed, yes, exactly. Could be.
Oh, I wonder why this person's out for 12 days.
Yeah, with nothing said otherwise. And I think it, like, I'm not sure you can, by the rules of roster construction and Major League Baseball, I'm not sure you're allowed to go on that IL for other reasons. So right. It's weird. Yeah. But anyway.
By the way, I'm not a hockey guy, but do you think if a hockey player has appendicitis, they'd still list it as an upper body injury?
It's right on the cusp, right? It's like right. I guess that's upper.
A central body injury.
Central body injury. Yes, exactly. A middle body interior. Yeah. Knock. Yeah. Any other points before we wrap here?
No, I don't think so. I guess my question for you as our resident prospect person is, who do you think is next? Like, who's kind of the next wave in the next maybe month or two that we might see some of up here?
Caleb Killian is a guy we've talked about who is the Cubs' best starting pitching prospect in a long time. He came over with Alexander Canario in the Chris Bryant trade last year, and Killian
Canario in a coal mine.
Canario,
I can't stop myself.
You can't. Help. You're the way God made you, and that's you got to do you. So yeah, Caleb Killian, as of last week, was leading AAA in ERA, and he's been missing some bats. The velocity has been creeping up. In Arizona last year, he was like touching 98 as a starter, and he hasn't been that high, but he's been sitting, I think, more around 95. He has a plus changeup, and his control was like otherworldly last year. I think he had 110, like around 110 strikeouts and 10 walks or something. And this year he's been walking a little bit more, but I think that's been in an effort to miss more bats and not just get by with hammering your good stuff in the zone. But Caleb Killian could be up. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if he's up in a month. Brennan Davis, and this is why Brennan Davis, I believe in as a prospect. All the major prospecting sites have him top 50. Some have him top 20. Brennan Davis was doing awful at the plate. He had been slumping terribly to begin this year, and that's fine. This happens, and he's still very young. He's up at AAA, but he's injured now. And so I think like Brennan Davis, in terms of prospects who aren't going to be up super soon, this is why I like locking up very good major leaguers when you have them, because as we were talking about dealing away the older Cubs who were still, in the middle, maybe starting to come over the crest of their prime, we were hearing about, because Brennan Davis and Miguel Amaya are going to be the next wave. Well, I mean, you just don't know. So this is why you lock up good players. But Brennan is hurt right now. I think Caleb Killian is, as far as prospects who might come up, who might stay up, I think Caleb Killian is the next one on your radar. Right-handed pitcher, could be up anytime.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, in closing, sign Contreras to an extension or sell the fucking team.
Yes, great call, and follow us on Twitter at Away Games Pod on Twitter and Instagram. And good luck to Morel and Hughes. Hope you guys get in games on your first call up and don't get the Justin Steele treatment, the OG Steele treatment of coming up, sitting in the bullpen, and then going home. Let's get him in a game at least.
No Moonlight Grams.
No Moonlight Grams. Get him in there.